So today we are going to look at imaginary number I and how we can apply it to simplifying and solving equations. So first of all, in the left corner right here, we have the definition of I and also all the different iterations that I can become, like I squared, I cubed, I to the fourth, and really to an exponent level of infinity. First of all, anytime that we see I, what we're going to think in our heads is it's going to be the square root of -1. In the same way that if you were offered a square root of a negative number, like let's say -25, I'm going to be like, oh, there's a negative value in there, and I am going to use my math skills to make it 25 times -1, and then I'm going to do 25 times the square root of -1 because I can break that up. And if you notice, I is equal to -1, which means that this square root of -1 right here, I'm going to replace that with I. Whoops. So we are going to do square root of 25 times I. Now, the square root of 25 is 5. And then we have this I sitting here, and we can write that as 5I. So this is a way for us to be able to take a square root of a negative, which we're not allowed to take the square root of, and actually be able to solve it. So this is the most simplest form, is taking a negative under a square root and getting that to a value that we can actually deal with. Now, there's going to be more complex scenarios, and we want to be able to manage those as well. So let's say instead we had 7 minus the square root of -8. Okay, so we have some stuff going on here. We have a -8 underneath our square root. So anytime you see that negative underneath your square root, you're going to think to yourself, aha, I need to use an I. So I'm going to break it up, and I'm going to do 8 times -1. And that means that I am going to do the square root of 8 times the square root of -1. And that little square root of -1 we've talked about, that whole guy turns into I. So I'm going to do 7 minus the square root of 8 times I. And now the square root of 8, this is using those factoring skills. We're also going to break that down. So I'm going to move that actually over here, and we're going to do 7 minus the square root of 4 times 2. And I'm going to put the I in the front so I don't accidentally put it back underneath my square root. So we're going to do 7 minus I times the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And now the square root of 4, I can actually do that, right? That's 2. So I'm going to do 7 minus I, and then I have 2 times the square root of 2. So I'm going to pull out that 2 from right here, and we're going to get 7 minus 2I times the square root of 2. And that's going to be my answer to simplify this problem that started off with 7 minus the square root of -8, and I've now ended up with this value right here. So the goal is to make your life a little bit easier as you work your way through. Okay, and we are going to pause.